I read power meters for 30 years. And in 30 years I learned exactly one rule that nobody printed in any manual. If a number is impossible, you do not write down what you saw. You write down what they expect. Because the day I finally wrote down the truth was the day I found out the truth had my name on it. My route was the North County. 300 and some accounts. Farmhouses, trailers, a feed store, a church with a meter the size of a refrigerator. I knew every dog by name and every gravel drive by the sound it made under the truck. The last address was different. It was at the very top of a private drive off Cold Haller Road. A long climb through pines, no mailbox, no number on a post. Just a meter on a grey house at the end of the gravel. On my first week, the man training me, Vaughn, 30 years on the job himself, drove me up that drive and stopped the truck short of the house. He didn't pull all the way up. He pointed at the meter from 40 feet away and said, "You read that one, you read it alone, and you don't go inside if they ask you in." I asked him who lived there. He looked at the house for a long moment. And then he said, "Nobody you'll ever meet. Just write the number and come back down." That was the only account on the whole route that wasn't on the handheld unit. It was on a paper card. A single index card in a metal box under the dash that got passed driver to driver. Yellowed soft at the corners. 30 years of readings in a dozen different hands. Mine the last of them. I should have looked at the dates on that card the very first day. It took me 30 years. The reading was always high. That is the first thing. Not high like a big family with the air running. High like a small town. The disc in that meter never stopped. Not at 3 in the morning, not in a power outage, not the winter the substation blew, and the whole North County went dark for 2 days. I drove up during that outage just to see. Every house cold and black for miles. And that 1 meter spinning, steady, bright, lit from somewhere. That wasn't the grid. I did the math once, in the truck, with a pencil. The draw on that meter month over month was more than the entire rest of my route combined. More than the feed store and the church and 200 homes put together. Out of 1 grey house with the curtains always shut. I asked the office about it once early on. A polite woman named in the billing department, very calm, told me. That account is flagged. You don't need to report anomalies on flagged accounts. Just submit the reading. I asked her what the flag meant. She said, "It means somebody above both of us is already handling it." So I submitted the reading. Every month for 30 years, and the disc kept spinning, like it was feeding something that was always hungry. 3 years ago I started cleaning out the route to hand it off. I was getting close to retirement. I wanted whoever came next to have it tidy. So I went down to the county records office. Public counter, fluorescent lights, a clerk eating a sandwich. I pulled the build permit on the grey house. Just to put a real address on the file. A real legal description for the new driver. The permit was dated, stamped and filed, all official. Construction approved. And the year on it was 11 years after the first reading on that index card. I thought I'd misread it. I laid the card next to the permit on the counter. First reading on the card, a date in the spring. Build permit for the house the meter is bolted to 11 years later to the season. The meter had been turning drawing power, billing month after month for 11 years. Before there was a house to bolt it to. Before there was a wall. Before there was a foundation. Before there was anything up that gravel drive, but pine trees and a flat patch of dirt. The clerk asked me if I was all right. I said I'd written a date down wrong. I took the card back and I drove home. And for the first time in 27 years, I did not submit a reading that month. Skipping a reading gets you a phone call. I got the call the next morning. Not from billing. From a man I'd never spoken to in 30 years. No name, I recognized. Very pleasant, very patient. He asked me, like it was nothing, whether I was experiencing any difficulties on the Cold Haller account. I told him I wanted to understand who pays that bill. Because in 30 years I had never once seen a name on it. No customer, no tenant, just a flag and a number. He went quiet for a moment and then he said, "The company carries that account internally. It always has. You don't need to worry about who pays it." I told him I'd like to see the account history. 30 years of it. I said it was for the handoff, which was half true. He said he'd send it. He even sounded relieved. Like a man finally allowed to set something down. He said, "You've earned a look. You, of all people. I didn't understand what he meant by that. You, of all people. I do now. The history came in a thick envelope. 30 years of statements for the Coldhaller account, month by month, printed and bound. Every single bill had been paid. In full, on time. Paid by the company itself. Just like the man said. An internal transfer every month, quietly clearing an impossible amount of power. But that wasn't the part that stopped me. Every statement has a bill to line, a name, an address. The person of record. Even when the company pays, the bill is made out to somebody. Every bill on that account, 30 years of them, was made out to me. My full name, my middle initial, the one I never use, and an address. An apartment on Wexler Street, Unit 12. I lived in that apartment, Unit 12, Wexler Street. But I didn't move into it until 4 years after I started this job. The bills were made out to me, at that apartment, starting 4 years before I ever set foot in it. Before I'd signed the lease. Before I'd ever seen the building. Before I had any reason on earth to know that street existed. I sat at my kitchen table with 30 years of paper. And I tried to find one bill, one single month, where the name was not mine. There wasn't one. Not from this year. Not from before I was hired. Not from the 11 years before there was a house. The very first bill for power drawn out of an empty field, 11 years before the foundation was poured, was addressed to me, at an apartment I would not rent for another 15 years. I should have shredded the whole stack and finished my last 3 years quiet. Instead, I drove up the gravel that night. First time in 30 years I pulled all the way to the house, past Vaughn's invisible line, right up to the porch. The curtains were lit from inside. That soft amber glow. And through them, against the light, I could see the shape of furniture. A couch, a tall lamp, a long table set for a meal. The meter on the wall beside the door was spinning so fast the disc was a solid blur. And it was warm. I put my hand near the glass and it was warm like a stovetop. 30 years and I'd never once been close enough to feel it. There was a doormat. A plain brown doormat. And stitched into it, where most mats say welcome, this one said, my name, not the family name, not the Coldhallers or any made-up thing. My name, first, middle initial, last. Worn soft, like 30 years of boots had wiped on it. And in the front window, the curtain moved, just an inch. The way a curtain moves when someone on the inside has been waiting at it for a very long time and has just seen the truck finally come all the way up the drive. I didn't knock. I backed the truck down the gravel so fast I clipped a pine. And the next morning I drove 3 hours to find Vaughn. He'd retired 15 years back, lived alone now in a little place by a reservoir. He opened the door, looked at my face and said, you went up to the house. I told him everything, the permit, the 11 years, the bills. My name on every one of them, my name on the doormat. He didn't act surprised. He poured 2 coffees with hands that shook a little. And he sat down and he said, they were made out to the man who reads the meter. They always are. I asked him what that meant. He said, the account doesn't belong to whoever lives in the house. It belongs to whoever climbs the drive. Whoever writes the number down, month after month, year after year. The reader. You feed it by reading it, he said. The looking is the wire. I asked him if the bills were in my name now. Whose name were they in when he had the route? He went very still. And he said, they were never in mine. I checked, same as you, 30 years ago. The whole time I drove that route, every bill, going back before either of us was born, was already made out to you. I retired the day I understood, he said. I figured if I stopped climbing the drive, it would have to find somebody else to put on the doormat. He looked at his shaking hands. It didn't. It just waited for you to climb it long enough to look. I drove home. There was a new envelope waiting in my mailbox. Utility logo in the corner. No stamp, no postmark. Just my address in pencil. Inside was one statement. Next month's bill on the Coldhaller account. Made out, like always to me, at the Wexler Street apartment. But the service address line was different. For 30 years it had read the grey house on Coldhaller Road. This one didn't. This one read Wexler Street, Unit 12. My apartment. The bill had moved. The account that had been climbing one gravel drive for 41 years had changed its service address to where I sleep. And the meter reading on it, the number in the box, where I have written a number every month for 30 years, wasn't a number. It was a date. The last day of this month. My retirement date. The day I stopped climbing the drive. At the bottom, in the same pencil as the address, someone had written one line. The reader retires. The account stays open. New service address confirmed. Please leave the lights on. I'm telling you this on the last week of the job. I haven't climbed the drive since the night of the doormat, but it doesn't seem to matter whether I climb it anymore. The meter on the side of my own building, the one for Unit 12, my apartment, the one I've walked past for 15 years, started spinning last week. Fast. Faster every day. Warm to the touch now. Drawing more power than the whole rest of the building put together. My lights don't flicker. My bill, the real one, hasn't changed. The draw isn't going to anything I can see. It is just going out of the wall into nothing. The way it went into an empty field 11 years before a house stood there. I understand it now. The house on Coldhaller was never the thing drawing the power. The house was just where the meter happened to be, while the reader was somebody else's name. The thing that draws the power doesn't live in the house. It lives in the account. And the account lives wherever the reader sleeps. It drew for 11 years before the house, because it was already waiting on the man who would one day climb the drive. It was billing me before I was hired, before I rented the apartment. It built the house 11 years late, just to give me a meter to read until I was close enough to retire and bring the account home. So here is what I know. On the last day of this month, I stopped climbing the drive. And the account stays open at my address, in my name. The way it has been since 11 years before there was anything here at all. And it has asked me in pencil, very politely, to please leave the lights on. If you have a meter on the side of your home, and you do, go out tonight and look at it. If the disc is still, you're fine. Sleep easy. But if it is turning and your lights aren't on, and your bill hasn't moved, and you can't for the life of you say what is drawing the power, then somewhere there is an account. And somewhere there is a name on it, going back further than any house you've ever lived in. And if you go looking for that name, the way I did, I think you already know whose it is going to be. Leave the lights on. If this one followed you home, subscribe. There are other accounts still open that we haven't read yet.